but he wasn't going to come out and say this to the world. And he had a lot of lady fans.
A simple sentence, but enough to shake the foundation of American music. Luther Vandross, the golden voice of century-defining love ballads, the man who made millions of women swoon with every lyric, carried a secret with him to the grave at age 54. A secret he once swore he would never reveal. Until Patti LaBelle, his closest friend, unexpectedly broke the silence on live television in front of millions of viewers. She didn't cry, but all of America was shaken. What exactly did Patti reveal? Why did Luther never once speak publicly about his love life? And what was the real nature of his ambiguous relationship with Gregory Hines? Watch to the end to uncover the secret he chose to take to the grave, and the reason why the whole world still dares not speak its name aloud. Patti LaBelle's revelation unlocked decades of silence. Patti LaBelle's revelation not only stunned fans, but acted like an invisible key unlocking doors of the past that had remained tightly shut for decades. When that fragile truth was spoken that Luther was gay, a flood of questions thought long buried by time suddenly returned more urgent than ever. Why would an artist who always sang about love never have a single public relationship throughout his career? And what about the relationship between Luther Vandross and Gregory Hines? Two gifted men, two icons of American music and theater, walking side by side under the spotlight, choosing silence over explanation, and carrying with them questions that were never answered. Between them, was it only friendship, or was something deeper concealed beneath the surface of fame and what society called normal? Let's begin to unravel the mystery from the relationship between these two men. Two men, two stages, and a wordless love song. It wasn't the first time they met at a tribute event, not the first time they shared a stage. But something quietly happened in 1986, when Luther Vandross and Gregory Hines stepped into the studio to record the song, "There's Nothing Better Than Love." People often say, music doesn't lie. And it was this sweet love song that first began to whisper throughout showbiz. Was there something more than friendship between them? That question wasn't random, because when the song was released, it immediately soared to #1 on the Billboard R&B chart and broke into the top 50 of the Hot 100, a resounding success. For a male-male duet at a time when the music market still heavily favored male-female pairs glamorized as romantic chemistry. But Luther and Gregory were different. They weren't acting love. They sang like they had lived it. The chemistry between two men with completely contrasting voices, one silky smooth the other, rugged and honest, created a song that made people believe in a kind of deep, unnamed emotion. But behind that hit was more than just music. It was a long journey of two seasoned souls, two lonely men once doubted, boxed in, even rejected by the entertainment industry, who when they met suddenly found a resonance no outsider could understand. Gregory Hines was already a veteran star. He wasn't only famous for his legendary tap dancing, which earned him a Tony Award in 1992 for his role in Jelly's Last Jam, but also known as a pioneer who helped bring tap dance back to the Broadway stage after its decline. But few knew Gregory had a secret passion: music. Back in the 1970s, he was the frontman of a rock band called Severance, performing in Venice, Los Angeles, and releasing an album under a sub-label of G&P Crescendo. But it wasn't until he met Luther that he dared to step into the world of R&B, a realm rich in emotion, but also steeped in prejudice. Luther, known for his sharp eye for talent, saw something in Gregory that went beyond performance. He saw a voice yet to be uncovered, a vocal tone with a raw honesty like an unhidden scar. And Luther decided to do something few others had done with Gregory. He didn't hire him as a celebrity guest, but taught him from scratch, guiding him through every note, every breath, every emotional phrase, as if shaping a new form out of an already established talent. Luther didn't just bring me into the studio and turn on the mic, Gregory once shared. He sat there listening to every syllable I uttered, correcting each word, not because he was a perfectionist, but because he wanted me to truly sing from the heart. The result was, "There's Nothing Better Than Love," a milestone not only in Hines's career, but also in Luther's musical journey. People said they had never seen Luther so soft. In the way he harmonized with Gregory, there was something beyond technique. It was empathy. They sang as if sending messages to one another that words could never fully express. After the success of the duet, Luther invited Gregory again to record the song, "That Girl Wants to Dance With Me." 1988, which he wrote and produced himself. This time, the tone was entirely different, fast, energetic, and full of vitality, just like Gregory's dance steps on stage. The song made it into the Billboard R&B Top 20 and became especially popular in major dance clubs across New York and Los Angeles. At this point, people no longer saw Gregory as an actor who sings, but as a true singer, thanks in part to Luther's musical touch and in part to the natural dynamic between them, as if they had been performing together for a very long time. But what made the media begin asking questions wasn't the quality of their music. It was what happened off stage. Luther and Gregory were often seen dining together privately, laughing heartily backstage at award shows, whispering something in the front row before bursting into loud laughter. With any other male artist duo, this might have been seen as simple friendship. But with two men who kept their personal lives completely private, had no known romantic partners, and had never been involved in any public relationships with women, everything suddenly felt different. Gregory once said he respected Luther as a mentor, but declined to comment on any question about his friend's personal life. Luther, as always, deflected questions about his sexuality with clever jokes. But it was precisely that silence which over the years became a thick wall hiding what they couldn't or didn't dare say aloud. They never confirmed a romantic relationship, but they never denied it either. And in an industry where everything could be a publicity stunt, the decades of silence became the very thing that made people believe more than any declaration ever could. When Gregory Hines passed away in 2003, Luther said nothing. No statement, no eulogy. But someone recalled him sitting quietly backstage that evening, staring into the void for a long time, before finally stepping out to sing, "A House Is Not a Home." No one knew who he was singing for. But that night, the audience seemed to feel that something had just been lost. And 2 years later, Luther passed too. Suddenly, without a single word left behind about his private life, without any partner mentioned in his obituary. Only music and secrets never confirmed. But the audience remembers. And they still whisper like his own lyrics once did. There's nothing better than love, unless that love must be hidden for a lifetime. The pairing of Luther and Gregory was a rare kind, a mesmerizing voice, a pair of free-moving feet, and a bond beyond music. The pairing of Luther and Gregory was a rare kind, a mesmerizing voice, a pair of free-moving feet, and a bond beyond music. But behind the applause, Luther's silence began to speak louder. Because unlike Gregory, Luther had no character to hide behind. He had only music, and within it, he buried everything left unsaid. The sweetest love songs came from a man who had never publicly loved anyone. And that very paradox is what continues to haunt the world. Luther Vandross, the golden voice of love stories that were never real. Luther Vandross never shouted to assert himself. He whispered, he glided through melodies, like a thin wisp of smoke, and let his voice tell the stories his heart would never speak aloud. And perhaps that's why the world so easily loved him, but never truly saw him a gentle musical genius rejected simply for not fitting the mold that the industry had shaped for a black man singing ballads in the 1980s. At the time, R&B was exploding with images of the ideal masculine man, muscular, carefree, seductive, and charismatic like Bobby Brown, Teddy Pendergrass, or New Edition. But Luther Vandross was different. He stepped on stage in a dark suit with sleek hair and a soft smile, as if always apologizing to the audience for stirring their hearts too much. No fiery choreography, no bold body language. Luther just stood there and let his voice do everything that needed to be done. But it was exactly that difference that became his biggest obstacle. The music industry, in his own words, didn't know what to do with me, because they had never seen a chubby black singer lacking Hollywood-style sex appeal dare to sing lyrics soaked in romance fragility and almost femininity in their delivery. Luther didn't just not fit. He disrupted the entire framework the market wanted to impose on R&B men. So despite releasing a string of massive hits like Never Too Much, 1981 Here and Now, 1989 earning him his first Grammy for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance, and especially Dance With My Father, 2003 winning him 4 Grammys in one night, Luther was still boxed into the category of for black audiences only. Record labels refused to invest in mainstream marketing, denied him access to national talk shows, and treated his music as something for regional radio, not for mainstream America. Some market executives even bluntly said, "White women love his music." but they won't buy records from a man like him if they know who he is. And so the image of the dreamy man for women became the mask Luther had to wear. Labels didn't care who he truly loved. They just needed him to keep writing gentle love songs, letting women believe he was singing to them. In a brief 1994 radio interview, when asked about love, Luther smiled softly. "I write the songs I wish I lived in." It sounded like a joke, but the host fell silent for a few seconds, as if suddenly realizing something much deeper. Luther had never gone public with a single relationship. No one had ever seen him holding hands with a lover. No paparazzi ever caught him at a romantic dinner. No actress ever hinted they had been something with Luther Vandross. Over more than 2 decades in the industry, he never let fans know who truly inspired his aching love songs. Instead, he lived quietly and alone. According to his longtime personal assistant, Max Sadek, who worked with Luther for over 10 years, he had a habit of calling at 1 or 2 a.m. just to talk. No specific agenda, no pressing topics, just nameless sadness. He just needed someone to listen, Max said. Sometimes he didn't say anything. He just put on music and let it play, in silence. Patti LaBelle, one of Luther's rare soulmates, once shared. He was scared his mother would find out, scared she'd be disappointed, scared his longtime fans would turn away. And above all, he was scared of destroying the image he spent his whole life building. Perhaps that's why Luther never came out. Not because he was ashamed, but because he feared people wouldn't love him the same, once they knew that the love songs he wrote weren't for them. There's one particularly meaningful song in Luther's career called "Any Love." The lyrics are full of yearning, almost a prayer from someone searching for real love in a world full of empty promises. When the song came out in 1988, many fans thought it was written for women who couldn't find their ideal man. But those close to Luther knew it was a song he wrote for himself. A gentle, fragile, fearful man, unable to love openly, waiting for anyone to come to him without asking him to change. The cruel irony is that despite being called the king of love songs of his generation, Luther Vandross never truly lived inside a real love. According to Patti, there was a time he fell deeply in love, but was rejected. That heartbreak followed him for years. And after that, he never opened his heart again. He didn't need someone to sleep with, Patti said. He just needed someone to love him for who he really was. And that real self to the very end was never allowed to be seen. When Luther passed away in 2005 at the age of 54, after a stroke and a long battle with diabetes, there was no partner at his side. No one beside the hospital bed, except family and a few close friends. In his obituary, there was no mention of a life partner, no trace of a love story ever lived, only music and a secret that died with him. Like an unwritten inscription on a gravestone, he sang of love his whole life, but never got to live it. Maybe the saddest thing isn't who Luther Vandross was, but that he was never allowed to let the world know who he truly was. Gregory Hines, tap legend, and the moments he left unspoken. If Luther Vandross was the soft whisper of unanswered love songs, then Gregory Hines was the sound of heels echoing across the Broadway stage, precise, fierce, and full of life. But behind the astonishing footwork, behind the performances that made audiences leap to their feet in endless applause, was a man with an inner world so complex even he never chose to explain it to the world. Gregory was born in New York in 1946 and grew up almost entirely to the rhythm of jazz and wooden floors. At just 5 years old, he began performing on small stages across Harlem with his brother Maurice Hines. The two quickly earned the nickname the Golden Tap Shoes, and their father, a jazz drummer, joined in turning the Hines kids into Hines, Hines and Dad, one of the first successful family acts on American television in the post-World War II era. But Gregory didn't want to be just another masterful dancing machine. As he entered adulthood, he began pushing back against classical tap, where every move was pre-choreographed proper and polished in the Broadway tradition. Gregory chose to break every rule. He danced to the rhythm of his breath, intentionally, went off beat at times, tapped his toe like a drum, and improvised with live musicians on stage as if they were a jazz band. That style, free-form jazz tap, quickly made him the centerpiece of tap's revival. The media called him the man who saved tap from extinction. Broadway could no longer look away. and in 1992 he won the Tony Award for Best Actor in Jelly's Last Jam, a musical about the life of jazz legend Jelly Roll Morton, as if Gregory were telling his own story through the rhythm of every step. But Gregory didn't stop at Broadway. He crossed into film playing everything from a cold-blooded gangster in the Cotton Club to a witty cop in Running Scared, from dancing with Mikhail Baryshnikov in White Nights to a moving performance in the TV film Bojangles, which earned him a prestigious Emmy in 2001. In every role, he carried his own rhythm, as if he never stopped dancing, even when delivering dialogue. Music came to him as a natural continuation. But not everyone knows that Gregory refused to become a singer for many years, even though he possessed a warm, captivating baritone voice. It wasn't until Luther Vandross reached out not to invite, but to guide, that Gregory stepped into the studio and recorded "That Girl Wants to Dance with Me." For others, it was just an experiment. For Gregory, it was a moment where he dared to reveal a part of himself he had never shown. Still, there was another part of Gregory that he never revealed, at least not publicly. His personal life was always a gray zone between rumor signal and intentional silence. On paper, he was married 3 times, had a daughter named Daria, who followed in his footsteps as a dancer. In one interview, he once said, "I love women. I love their presence, their energy." But when asked deeper, who did he love? Who was he really committed to? Gregory smiled, changed the subject, or simply fell quiet. The thing is, he didn't have to say it. What he did already said, enough. Gregory had appeared at underground drag performances in New York in the 1970s not to shock, but because it was the only free space where I could just be myself. He once played a drag role in an off-Broadway play. He supported and participated in campaigns for LGBTQ+ artists. And most importantly, he always protected his brother Maurice, who came out as gay in the 1980s, from public judgment and attack. It's no coincidence that Andre de Shields, a legendary Broadway artist and Black queer icon, once said, during a memorial tribute, Gregory understood what it meant to live among the unspeakable. He didn't need a label because he lived beyond labels. A compliment, but also a sigh for an entire generation of Black artists who had to wear 2 masks, one for the public, one for themselves. What's worth noting is that Gregory never denied the rumors, but he never confirmed them either. As if he was living in his own version of the truth, a place where he didn't need to declare an identity, didn't need to come out, because he never went into any performance of identity at all. In his final public speech before his death, he said, "If there's anything I want to leave behind, it's freedom. Not for someone to live like me, but for them to dare to live like themselves." Perhaps that's why when people look back at the relationship between Gregory and Luther, no one needs proof, just feeling. One man sang of a love he never voiced. The other danced about freedom he never declared. Both chose silence as their language. And sometimes that silence echoed louder than any declaration. When Gregory died of liver cancer in 2003 at the age of 57, there was no scandal, no personal statement, no one spoke for him. But hundreds of artists, from tap dancers to Broadway performers, from Harlem drag queens to young YouTubers, all said the same thing. "He made me believe I could be myself." There is no legacy clearer than that, especially when it comes from someone who never once defined who he was. Gregory Hines lived a life that never needed to shout anything. He simply danced and let the rhythm speak for the rest. Shared truths and a secret never confirmed. They didn't come from the same place, didn't grow up in the same world, didn't choose the same artistic path. One was born in the heart of impoverished Detroit, finding himself in his mother's soft singing and an old piano. The other was a Harlem child prodigy tapping on wooden floors from the age of 5 as a kind of survival instinct. They didn't share a voice, a style, or a range, but there was something Luther Vandross and Gregory Hines never had to say out loud. They saw each other in the crowd and knew they weren't alone. They were both Black men who rose to fame in the American entertainment industry at a time when that alone was a daily battle. A battle for recognition, for respect for the right not to be boxed into the stereotypes the white-dominated industry had constructed and imposed. And inside that battle, they lived another life, one hidden from all eyes. In the 1980s and 1990s, coming out as gay in the music or film industry wasn't just considered brave, it was career suicide. Especially for Black artists, the barrier wasn't just sexuality, but a double expectation. "You're already black, don't make it any harder." They were forced to play what the audience wanted to see. Strong, desirable men who lead conquer women, never show weakness, never appear soft, and certainly never love another man. Luther Vandross was the voice of love, but never named the person he loved. Gregory Hines was the embodiment of freedom, but never truly defined himself. They said nothing, wrote no memoirs, offered no hints in interviews, left behind no evidence. But between them lay a long trail of mirrored behaviors, identical choices, shared loneliness, and mutual silence. Maybe it was a deep friendship. Maybe it was a love that once or never happened. Maybe it was simply the empathy of two people living beneath the weight of what could never be spoken. But if you look closely, every piece hints at one thing. The relationship between Luther and Gregory didn't resemble any typical professional or industry connection. They appeared together precisely when both were at their peaks and at their most misunderstood. They didn't star in the same films, didn't share a management company, had no obligation to align, yet were constantly seen together backstage at award shows, in old uncaptioned photos, in rare duets no one recalled rehearsals for. And above all, in the way they treated each other with an intuitive tenderness, as if one could always sense the quiet inside the other. When black comedians mocked Luther for his weight or feminine style, Gregory never joined in. When rumors swirled about Gregory's closeness to a male director, Luther never spoke publicly, but never distanced himself either. They didn't protect each other with words, but with unconditional presence. Whether love existed or not, that loyalty in Hollywood was already rare. Those close to them often spoke in half sentences about their bond. A friend of Luther once said, he had periods where he'd disappear completely. No one could reach him. No one knew where he was. Then he'd come back calm, lighter, and singing better than ever. When asked if he knew who Luther was, with the friend simply shook his head. "If I did, I wouldn't say." Andre DeShields, a Broadway artist who once shared the stage with Gregory, once said in an interview, "Some loves don't need to be named. Their existence is enough." Many believe he meant Gregory, but it could have been for anyone who ever lived a truth that wasn't allowed to be spoken. Perhaps even Luther. And when Gregory passed in 2003, Luther said nothing. No farewell, no press statement. But just a year later, Luther suffered a stroke. And by 2005, he too was gone, carrying with him an answer the world would never be able to ask again. Maybe they loved each other. Maybe not. But it was the prolonged silence, the choice to neither confirm nor deny, that created a vast space the public filled with speculation, questions, and above all, longing. Not because everyone wanted to know the truth, but because somewhere in that relationship, they saw something of themselves. A glance, never named, a touch, never spoken of again. A chapter in life that only one other person, be it a friend, a lover, or someone who simply looked in the same direction, could ever truly understand. Luther's death, unspoken. Gregory's quiet departure. Together they turned what was never confirmed into something symbolically real. No wills, no confessions were needed. Because what haunts people isn't the question, were they in love? It's this, why were they never allowed to live as they truly were? Even after teaching the world what love meant through music and movement. They didn't have to be a couple. They only needed to be allowed to live as free people. But perhaps in their era, that was still too much to ask. And that silent space never filled is what makes the story between Gregory Hines and Luther Vandross permanently haunting. Patti LaBelle, the keeper of the final secret. He wouldn't come out to the world because he had so many female fans. He once told me, "I just don't want to make the world sad." When Patti LaBelle said those words under the soft lighting of Way Up with Angela Yee, the audience fell silent. It wasn't a sensational claim, nor an accusation or harsh confession. It was the voice of a friend, someone who had held a secret for far too long, until she could no longer carry it. Luther Vandross passed away in 2005 after suffering a stroke that left him bedridden for the last 2 years of his life. Throughout that time, Patti stayed by his side, not as a fellow performer, but as family. She held his hand, sang him his own songs when he could no longer find the strength to sing them himself. And she was the only one who ever heard Luther confess, in a faint whisper, his greatest fear, that he would hurt his mother if she ever learned her son was gay. That was the biggest reason he kept it secret. until his death. Patti said, her eyes welling up. Not fame, not the public. It was his mother. For nearly 2 decades after Luther's passing, Patti LaBelle said nothing. She avoided all questions about his personal life, refused to comment on the speculation surrounding his relationship with Gregory Hines. "I promised I wouldn't say anything, at least not until I felt it was the right thing to do," she explained. And then, when the world had become more open, when the LGBTQ+ community in music was no longer as stigmatized as before, she chose to speak. Not to create drama, but to soothe a pain, a secret that had left Luther lonely, even when the world was in love with him. Still, her revelation didn't only bring sympathy. It was met with fierce controversy. Some accused Patti of betraying her friend by revealing something he had never chosen to say. Online forums and social media exploded with debates. Does anyone have the right to disclose a person's sexuality after their death? Is it liberation or violation? Meanwhile, many artists and fans thanked Patti. They called her the last torchbearer, the one who dared to say what the industry had long kept hidden. A famous black rapper tweeted, "We need to know what legends like Luther had to live through to understand just how precious freedom is today." A veteran music journalist wrote, "Luther didn't just leave behind a musical legacy, he became a symbol of a generation of artists who lived in silence, loved in shadows, and created from deep pain." When rewatching the interview clip, many noticed Patti's eyes as she spoke those words. There was no pride, no bitterness, only relief, as if she was finally letting go of a weight that had pressed on her heart for 20 years. "I didn't say this because I wanted to," she concluded. "I said it because I believe he deserves to be remembered fully with everything he was." And truly, once that truth was spoken, Luther's lyrics, "From Any Love, if only for one night to dance with my father," were heard in a new light. No longer just beautiful love songs, but the cries of a soul yearning to love without judgment. The whisper of a man who chose silence to protect his family, his career, and the fans who had loved him in the right way. Patti LaBelle didn't break a secret. She returned to his soul something he should have had long ago, the right to be himself, even if only after he was gone. And for many, it wasn't betrayal, but a final act of release, gentle as the stage lights dimming at curtain call. Perhaps we will never truly know what happened between Luther Vandross and Gregory Hines. Perhaps we will never truly know what happened between Luther Vandross and Gregory Hines. But one thing is undeniable. They lived, they loved in their own way. In silence, in the spotlight, and also in the shadows. No one dared to enter. Their story isn't just a hidden secret, but a mirror held up to society, where the gifted are forced to choose between personal truth and public success. If you've ever felt that some things can't be named but still reach your heart, then this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video to help us continue telling the forgotten stories, where memory, music, and truth meet in silence. Because some things don't need to be spoken, but still deserve to be heard.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.